Hello everybody, welcome to the webinar. Today we are going to talk about the design and implementation of Swagger Editor. It's more about our journey, like why we built Swagger Editor and how we work with, we meaning folks at Apigee work with Swagger community to build this online Swagger Editor that gets gets used by tens of thousands of developers online, and it's we're getting some good feedback on this tool, so we're very happy about it. So let's get let's get this thing started. Some housekeeping. This webinar and the slides are going to be available on social channels, the YouTube Apigee channel, SlideShare. And the last but not least, we have started this online portal, Q&A portal called community.apigee.com, where you can ask about, obviously, it's everything Swagger, anything Apigee as well. And it's a very active community these days. I'm being helped by Mohsen here because he wrote almost 99% of the code behind Swagger Editor, so it's actually his presentation. I'm here to help facilitate the conversation, give you some intro, and why we built Swagger Editor, and then Mohsen will give you the nuts and bolts of the process we went through in terms of choosing the framework and all that stuff, right? So this is Mohsen on my right here. You can see it. And I'm Prabhat here. We are from Apigee. So agenda is that we have quite a bit of people signed up, and I'm sure some of you have just heard about Swagger. You don't know what exactly it is. So I'll just give you a brief intro of Swagger, then talk about why we had to build Swagger Editor, what problem try to solve. Then we'll give you a quick demo of some of the features, so that when Mohsen talks about what it took to build those features and the roadblocks we ran into, you will have a better context into why, what feature we are talking about. And of course, Q&A is always on. Feel free to ask your question. We'll take those questions at the end of the presentation, because we have lots of materials to go to. Right, so let's get started. So Swagger is a API specification format. It's just used to define your API. We believe it's a very deterministic, a little bit opinionated, but I think for good cause. So for example, given a resource, it tells you what are the REST operations available on it, what are the request model going to be, what are the response models going to be, so that you as a consumer of API always know what you're getting into. There's no what if kind of scenario here, yes. Right? It's a language independent. There's nothing Java or .NET or Python or Scala about it. It's purely language independent. It's a huge ecosystem. Hundreds of thousands of developers using tools built by Swagger community. Some of them are live and publicly. Some of the internal tools, we hear about lots of tools that folks have built internally as well to meet their need. So besides being an API specification format, community has tools to not only generate documentation, but the SDKs both for the client side. So once you define your API, you can use the code gen to generate the SDK that you can bundle in your Android and iOS apps, and also the server side as well. And you can find a list of these libraries in the link on GitHub, Swagger API. GitHub, some of the libraries we're very happy and proud to be contributed to, and some of lot available from Swagger community as well. So the question, when you talk about defining an API, the question is always, should I write the API specification first or code first? Of course, we have some opinion about it, but from Swagger perspective, it doesn't care, right? And it totally depends on where in the API development life cycle you are in, right?
Yes.
I mean, if you already have millions of lines of code written that does XRS application for you, of course, your API is already defined. You just need to present in a nice documentation consumable format. So in that case, you already have code. You're going to define API later. But if you're just getting into your API development journey because you're just getting, you're new digital native, not digital native, or even if you are digital native, you're starting a new API program, then it makes sense to design the API first.
Yeah,
right?
The question is which way Swagger prefers.
Yeah.
Code first or?
Code first or design first. And Swagger doesn't care. He says, you could have both. In the beginning of the life cycle, you could just design it first. And as you start implementing and things change, of course, you're going to do code first, then expose that as API. Before we talk about Swagger Editor, quickly about Swagger 2.0. I'm not going to talk about Swagger 1.2 because there's a lot of history behind it. Swagger editor only supports Swagger 2.0, so that's in the context of the presentation. We'll talk about Swagger 2.0 only. So Swagger 2.0 new things in Swagger 2.0 are that it's a single file specification. So you define your operations, request model, response model all in one file. We can use JSON references to refer same one model across different API endpoints and resources, right?
Which is great for avoiding duplicate code.
Exactly. You don't have to write duplicate codes. It's backed by JSON schema, right? So that means that once you write your Swagger specification, you can use tools to validate whether your whether a specification is valid or not.
Yeah.
And because it's we want it to be more human friendly. Swagger 2.0 also, you can define Swagger 2.0 in the YAML, which we think is the first class citizen of Swagger 2.0 specification as well. And there are lots of lessons learned from this Swagger community with the 1.0, 1.1, 1.2 that have been applied in Swagger 2.0 to make it even better.
Yes.
Why YAML was added? So if you just look into this slide, what you see on the left side is very simple API definition that just has a one GET response. And same thing you see on the right side. If you as a human are typing this specification from scratch, there's lots of code and curly brackets that you have to deal with, which is more for computers and not for human, right? So that's why, and YAML is a superset of JSON anyway, so most of the things that you could do in JSON, you could do in YAML as well. It's just easier on your fingers.
Yeah, and if you don't like YAML, you can always write JSON.
Exactly.
Nobody can stop you.
Yeah. So let's repeat this because we get this question quite a bit. How should you build an API, right?
Yeah.
And then we usually follow up with the question of how should you build anything, right? Well, to build anything, you do design first. You think about it, what you're going to build. We think this is just a better approach of defining and designing an API, the request model, response model, what kind of validation you're going to impose on the API. Those things, thinking through those first, we believe help you create a better API. So what are the advantages of design first API development? As you are defining it, you can share your API with your consumer. So you have a very fast feedback loop. You get collaborative development because you're designing it, you're getting feedback, so you can change things on the fly. And what you have ultimately is testable API, which you can test in a mock mode, so that before you start implementing code, you can see how it actually looks.
Yeah, a great scenario for this is when you want to make a mobile app and you want a API for it. So your mobile developer needs to know how that API is looking like. So if you design the API first and give it to your mobile developer, then they are going to tell you if it's a good API, is it the API that needs to change before you wrote any code.
Right.
So.
And for designing good set of APIs, designing good set of anything, you need a good set of tools, right? So what are the tools existing? Swagger community already has lots of tools. The Swagger UI, there are lots of libraries that does not have visual aspect to it, and so few tools existed already. But when Swagger 2.0 came and we added the YAML support came, we needed some tool where you can, because it was a new specification and a lot of people don't know about Swagger, we needed some tool which gives you lots of help to design your API, it gives you feedback right away if things don't look right, and tells you how you can fix it, right? We just needed an interactive tool to help you write Swagger API specification. And even if you have been using Swagger API for Swagger specification a long time, you may not know all the stuff. Probably a couple of guys in the world, Rebron and Tony, they might know. I think we should give them benefit of doubt. They might know all this stuff, but they might need help sometimes as well. So we just needed this tool where it gives you some help as you are defining API, and there was just no authoring tool available for design first approach. So and we at Apigee needed it internally. Our customers needed it, so we thought, why not just build it and give it to community. So that's why we ended up building the editor. I'll give you a quick demo. So let me share my screen. This is so you can run Swagger editor on your laptop as well. It's an npm node module. You can start it and run it as any web application. but we have made it available online. So what you see on the left side is the editing pane where you write your YAML specification, and on the right side you see a real-time live rendering of what you have specified on the left side.
Yeah.
So let's say if you're starting completely from scratch, I would come here just to show you some of the features we have. There's a code completion, all the stuff that you see. There's an error right away here. It tells you what is missing. And YAML is a space sensitive, right?
Yes, it's indentation.
It's indentation sensitive, so you have
Yeah.
to make sure that there's a proper alignment. So as I do paths, let's take my.
It's not a slash, it's a slash.
Yeah, sorry. As I do paths, then it gives me code completion to do all the stuff. And here it tells me there's an error, right? So if I come here, it exactly knows where to add where the error is coming from and what I can do to fix it. So this is just two part what you already saw: code completion, left to right navigation, right to left navigation. To show you a more comprehensive example, let's say we're going to use the pet store. So this obviously it's a lot bigger. What you see over here is just to show you some of the things. If API needs authentication and you want to try it, you can add an access token. Then editor will save in memory and it will use that for any subsequent API calls, right? So that's there. I can go between. So let's say if I want to see lists, so all the resources based on the store, then I can just click on that and it will show me APIs that are related to a store.
Yeah.
Right. I can go back and forth between visualization pane to the editor pane, and it's very smart. So let's say if I wanted to talk about where is the response, where is the 405 response code defined. When I click on it, it takes me to that one. There's a code folding on the left side. So as I code fold left side, the right side also gets folded.
Yeah, it's all folded.
Also folded. And the last, and because we want to talk about the internals of it, I won't go more into the features, but you can also have there's a try it operation where you can send a request, you can see exactly what request is going to be sent to, send a request, and you will get an error because I did not add errors or whatever.
Yeah.
But the idea is that you can not only build API and get a dynamic feedback, but you can also try your operation if it's hosted somewhere and things like that.
Yeah. I think the best way to know how it works is to go to editor.swagger.io and try it out.
Try it out, exactly. So with Swagger Editor, you already saw what it is. So there's a lot went into it, building it. So now I will hand it off to Mohsen, where he's going to talk about his experience building it, what frameworks we ended up choosing, why we chose what we chose, what are the roadblocks you ran into. So go ahead, Mohsen.
Hello everyone. Yes, I'm going to talk about how we built it. We're not going to talk about how it works anymore. So I'm going to start from where we started the project. So when we wanted to start the project, we knew it's going to be a web app. So we chose Human to scaffold the project, to make folders and files necessary to start a fine and ready to use project. Human is great. I always recommend it. And then for the framework, I picked AngularJS. AngularJS is great for this kind of projects because we have a lot of templating, a lot of data binding, and Angular has a lot of community modules that we can use. And it's also very testable. And we used pure JavaScript in this project. We chose to not use CoffeeScript or any kind of compiled to JavaScript languages. This is mainly because the community. If it's in pure JavaScript, people can come in and edit the code. They don't need to know TypeScript or CoffeeScript to be able to contribute. We got a lot of good contributions from the community in Swagger Editor. So initially, when we started the project, we wanted something to render the Swagger documentations that we are editing. So we used Swagger UI. It was, of course, initially because Swagger UI is not perfect for this scenario. We're going to talk about this later.
Because Swagger UI is more, just assume that you already have a Swagger specification. It gives you a very nice visualization for it. But what we needed was on live editing experience.
Yes.
So immediate feedback loop and things like that. So instead of just hacking things up. You needed to find something better for the better user experience.
Exactly,
Right.
exactly. So for the code editor on the left side, you see that's ACE code editor. There were two options, and there's still two options for code editor in the web, which is ACE and Code Mirror. They're very similar in terms of features, but ACE has more community support and has a lot more activity in their GitHub. So with the Yeoman, Grunt was automatically chosen for the build system. I'm not 100% happy with Grunt. It's slow, and if today I would choose it, I would choose Gulp. Gulp is faster. We use Gulp in other projects that we spun off from Swagger Editor. JS Hint is of course there. In each code change, we run JS Hint to make sure we are not doing anything terrible with JavaScript, which is a lot of things is possible to do in JavaScript. So JS Hint help us not to do that. JavaScript code style, or JSCS. This helps us make the entire code base consistent in terms of code style. So why it's important? Because when we want the contributions, we want people come in and change code for us. So we don't want people come in, open an issue, and we comment there, hey, use spaces instead of tabs. We want everything be automatic. We didn't want to have any conversation about coding style.
Yeah, and we have been on the receiving end of that when we have tried to contribute to other projects, and pull requests will not get accepted because we did not know the code style behind it.
It always a hassle.
So it's always good to have it part of the build process, compile process itself, so that you know before going back and forth between the maintainer and the contributor.
Definitely,
Right.
yeah. For hosting the project, we chose GitHub. It is a no-brainer. It has great code hosting system, and issue tracker is good too. I also should add Protractor here for testing it. We use end-to-end testing mostly because for this kind of projects, end-to-end makes much more sense. So let's see how we started. So how a code editor should work. You edit the code, you see the feedback. So this is a workflow. You get the code, you compile it, do whatever needs to be done, and then pass it to renderer to render it. Very simple. You read the YAML from the code editor, which is ACE here, and then convert it to JSON, and then JSON is JavaScript object. You can just iterate through it and make HTML, which is very easy with Angular. But as I said, this is easy, right? As I said, we started with Swagger UI. So you see here, this is the initial prototype of Swagger Editor. It uses Swagger UI to render the Swagger. This works. When I change the code, I was reloading Swagger UI again to reflect the changes. See, this is how it works. This is a little video shows how changes are being displayed in Swagger Editor. So you see, it's really slow because Swagger UI were not meant to be used like that. Swagger UI didn't want to spec change every second. So the challenge is spec changes on every key press. Every time user types in, spec changes. And also spec can be invalid because people start typing things that are invalid or is incomplete. So user wants to know if their spec is invalid. User wants to know if error is in spec. So we have these challenges. We want to render fast. On each key press, we want to reflect changes. At the same time, we want to make the typing experience smooth. If we do a lot of things when the user is typing, it's going to slow down the UI thread. And also, we wanted to report errors. So let's see how we fix these issues. So rendering fast. Rendering is not fast. Simple as that. Because rendering involves modifying a lot of big strings and looping into a giant spec in some cases. So rendering, of course, is not fast.
Especially when we have seen some specs that are like thousands and thousands of lines.
Yeah. I've seen people put in 10,000 lines of Swagger in Swagger Editor. So we can't really render fast. So throttling the render task is reasonable in this case because we really don't want to render at key press. Also, AngularJS has a really good feature which is called dirty checking. It checks the scope object for small changes deep inside the scope object hierarchy. So if we can embrace this feature, then we can get some features, some speed out of Angular. So we are going to do all of these. So for keeping the typing experience smooth, as I said, we are throttling the rendering task. How throttling exactly works is when a user is typing, a series of events is being fired. But the function that renders is listening to these events. It does nothing until user stops typing for a certain amount of time. Let's say 200 milliseconds. After 200 milliseconds, it's going to stop rendering. Also, it's not just rendering. When a user types in, they usually type in YAML. Parsing YAML is this very expensive task, and we should throttle those tasks too. Also, it's the same for checking for errors. Checking for errors, the way it works is it walks the tree multiple times actually to see if there is an error in the spec. So those are expensive tasks, and we are going to throttle it. So now with this throttle system that we have and multiple tasks of rendering and parsing the YAML, reporting errors, we have this system that has a lot of components that each can fail. Each component can fail on its own. So this was when I decided to use pop-sub pattern. With pop-sub pattern, there's going to be each component can emit a error event. And there's going to be a error reporter component which listens to these events, and it's going to tell user that there's an error happened. It doesn't care where the error is coming from. It doesn't care what the error is. So it's very good for putting every logic in its own component. And for the editor, we wanted to have a state of success. What does it mean? Is that your spec is valid, the rendering is working, saving to the backend or to the local storage, everything is working. So to keep to have one component that keeps the state of success, it's going to be great. Let me show you how that works. So here is the Swagger editor. And you can see on the top right corner, it says all change saved. This is the component, at least the UI of the component, that shows the state of success. So if I make the spec invalid by removing this line, see, it says error. So this shows the state of success for each event, even if it's not the spec, if it's rendering failure or saving to file system failure. So how change listening and change listeners were implemented? I was almost using the DOM method. DOM has an add change listener or add event listener method for the DOM elements. I kind of use the same scenario, so components can hook in change listeners to other components. For example, the preview component can hook in the change listener to a storage component and say, hey, storage, if you get a new content in the I need to know. So the way it's implemented is you have an array of functions that are going to get invoked on event of change. And this array of functions can be extended with add change listener method here. So you can see this code in GitHub when you have access to the slides. So this is a diagram that shows how change listening thing works. So each one of these colored boxes are a component. I made the storage component with more details here. So you see that each component has an event listener. These event listeners can be multiple or one or can be none. So these are listening to other components. And there's also an event emitter which other components can listen to. The thing is, none of these components know about each other. They don't need to know how the structure and internal works. And that helps us to make components that are easy to swap. So Swagger Editor can work with local storage or a API for the backend to save the specs. We can easily change this storage component without other components even knowing it. So let's revisit those challenges. We wanted to render fast. We are not really rendering fast. We render as fast as we can, but with throttling, we have a really good typing experience and everything is working great. And we also reporting errors. By the way, error reporting is not the task of Swagger editor. Swagger editor uses Swagger tools to get these errors. Swagger tools is one of our great projects that we've developed in here in Apigee. So after we finish that, a new problem comes in. So YAML and JSON, actually JSON, not YAML. JSON does not have any definition of property ordering. So in a JSON object, the order of properties is unknown. So a problem like this can occur. You have post and get in this Swagger. Post is on top of get, but in rendering, get goes on top. Why? Because some processors sort the properties alphabetically. This can happen in YAML to JSON conversion or in Angular. I actually don't exactly know which component is doing it. But we needed to fix that. We needed to look at the YAML and see where these properties are, and then order those properties again in the Swagger rendering part. So here's an example how this behavior happens. See, you have the YAML, bars, foo, and then Jazz and bar, or Jazz is first, bar is second. But when you convert it to JSON, it can happen. Bar can go on top of Jazz. This is not usually happening, but if it happens once, it shows that it can happen later. So we needed to fix it.
It's all about experience of it.
Exactly.
The editor. If you define something as in alphabetical order, whatever order you have chosen, that's what should be honored on the rendering.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. So how we know that? How we can know which property comes first, what is the order? We needed to look into the YAML and inspect it. To do that, we needed the abstract syntax tree of the YAML. An abstract syntax tree. What is an abstract syntax tree? So see, this is the YAML. Let's say this tree structure representing a YAML. Same YAML we showed in 2 slides before. An abstract syntax tree is going to tell me where each property is started, which property ended, and where is the value. So everything in the YAML has start and end with column and row. So this is great because we can look into the YAML and see where each property is located based on their line number.
It's the same concept that any compiler, Java compiler, Scala compiler would use. When there is source code, it creates AST. That's how compiler is able to report you where the error is, with line number, column number. We needed the same functionality here.
Yeah.
So we needed to build AST that we can use it for our own advantage.
Yeah, we are becoming more like an IDE. We are understanding the code in Swagger better. So here is another smaller AST of the same YAML. So AST is very verbose. It's very hard to work with, but it's worth it because it gives you a lot of value. And even this is AST that I'm showing here is not a real AST. Okay, so what we needed to do, now that we can look up the position of the properties, keys in the YAML, we needed to keep this ordering precise. To do that, we couldn't use JavaScript object because, as I said, JavaScript object does not have ordering. We needed to convert every JavaScript object to an array. You see here, we had this structure before, which was an object. Now we converted to an array. The array has keys and values in it. So this is consistent across a lot of structures in Swagger editor. So to sort it, we needed some sort of sorter module, which gets the object and AST of the YAML and makes the array for us. So here's a more detailed diagram how it works with an example. Your YAML is that bar and then foo, and for some reason YAML to JSON bring foo on top. So we get this object, we have the AST, we do the lookups, and make this array. So the object that Swagger editor is iterating through to make the HTML is not Swagger. It is an array of arrays of arrays. So now that we have AST, now that we went through all this hassle, we can do much more with AST. AST can tell us if we have an error, we can jump to that line number. We can jump to the line numbers of the operations, parameters, and everything. Prabhat gave you a demo of that. And also make the rendering side and the code side in sync. So those two can know about each other. When you scroll up and down, the left side can scroll up and down at the same time. So here's a jump to line number for error example. So in this case, this is a YAML syntax error. So when there is a YAML syntax error, we don't even have the JSON yet. So the YAML syntax error is going to give us the line number. So when you have the line number, you just make a link that jumps to that line number. That's easy. But when there is a Swagger error, what happens is Swagger tools, which gives us the error, it gives us the error in the JSON object that we give to them. And that JSON object is not visible to user. User sees the YAML, we convert it to JSON, give it to Swagger tools, it gives us the error in that JSON. Now we want to go back to the YAML where that error is actually happening. So Swagger errors, which Swagger tools gives us, are Swagger JSON schema errors. JSON schema errors have line numbers usually, but that line number is in JSON, which is not useful.
Right.
It also has JSON path, a set of keys that if we follow, we're going to reach to that point that error is happening. So the line number is of course useless, we don't need that, but we need to get the line number in the YAML from the JSON path. How we do that? So the AST has all these scalars with the start and end points. What we needed to do is to get that JSON path, walk the AST down, and get to that scalar, and get the range of that scalar. What the scalar is an object, let's say, in YAML. And then from that scalar, based on the error, we can pick which point of that scalar in start or end is the error. Usually, we pick start. So AST Walker is very simple. It's a in-order tree walking system. It's very cheap operation because you have the path, you just walk down the tree. But we need to update this AST every time the user changes the code, and that is a very expensive operation again. But we throttle those, no worry about it. Next feature we are going to talk about is auto-completion.
So before we talk about auto-completion, the AST, although it was, when we were doing it, it took us quite a bit of time to get it right. But the advantage that we gave, you as users see the code folding, jumping from editing pane to the visualization pane, the error reporting, all this stuff. Now it seems like it was all worth it.
Yeah, definitely. We definitely needed AST, and in upcoming slides we're going to tell how we used AST again. So, how the auto-completion should work in Swagger Editor. Basically, we can predict the values in most cases in the YAML, but in the keys we can predict it because the keys are fixed. Like in info, you have contact. If you type C, we can predict that you might are typing contact. So let me give you a demo of that. So let's remove this contact. And if I press C, it's going to give me the contact key prediction. When I go in, again, when I press N, because contact can have name, it gives me name key prediction. So how it works is, we have where are you focused on, the point that you're typing, which has row and column. And we can scan the AST, the whole tree, to see where this point that you're typing in is mapped to the actual tree object that you're editing. So from there, then we can find the actual object and give you prediction based on that. So scanning the AST is very expensive. It's breadth first search. You have to scan the whole tree, go down and see which scholar is matching your column and row. It's very expensive. And also, it might not work because some of the positions that you're typing in might not be in the tree yet, or for some other reason that might not work. So it should fail gracefully. So how we provide those suggestions? Now that we have the scholar in the YAML AST, we need to see what is possible here. To do that, we made another tree, a secondary tree that I called it keyword map. It's all the keys possible in any path in the Swagger. So now that we have the path with that scholar from the AST, we can use that path, walk the secondary tree, and get the keywords. And also this keyword map can be extended with vendor extension, which is one of the features of Swagger editor. So here's an example of keyword map. The keyword map is basically everything possible in the Swagger with its types. So let's say in that scenario that I type N, my path was info contact. And when I typed N, I went to the editor, went to AST, scanned the whole tree, and find this scholar, this contact scholar. And it knew I'm here. And it gave me the path, info contact. I used that path to walk down this secondary tree, which is keyword map, to get to this object. Now I have 3 possible keys: name, URL, and email. All I needed to do is to send these keys as an array to ACE. I didn't need to make a edit distance calculation or anything like that. ACE has that feature. It just says, give me possible keys, and I'm going to figure out which one to suggest. So when I typed N, it showed name, and that's everything that ACE does. Okay. Try operation is one of the biggest features of the Swagger editor.
Yeah.
And I would say it's not 100% completed yet.
We're still working.
We are still working on it. But it's a very cool feature. You can try the Swagger operations right in the Swagger editor. You can get the request preview, what your request is looking like. You get a form of the parameters and the body of the request that you are sending, so you don't have to shape the request yourself. You just fill out the form and it makes the request for you. It also has response preview. It gives you raw response and also formatted response, and if it's possible to render it like an HTML or image, it's going to render it. So how this form that you fill in when you're making a request works is, in Swagger you have 2 sets of parameters. There is a operation parameter, and there is a operation body that can have a schema, which then again we can make a form out of it. And also there is global parameters. Global parameters are like authentication parameters or parameters that are referred to from the operation. So we get all these parameters, body, schema, everything, and smash together a JSON schema. Now that we have a JSON schema of this operation, we can easily make a form, because there are tons of form generator modules in Angular ecosystem. So the form is generated out of a JSON schema. All right. So one of the big problems we have with Swagger editor is course. People are coming in, opening issues in GitHub, asking questions in Stack Overflow that, hey, when I click the try operation, it just doesn't work. And that's because, and if your backend does not have course enabled and does not allow Swagger.io access your backend, it's not going to work. And the sad thing is, in the JavaScript side, it's impossible to know that a request failed because of course. So we can let user know, hey, your backend is not course enabled. So one thing that we wanted to do with Swagger editor, and we did it in past, is to move away anything that is possible to make it a module. So there's a lot of modules that we spun off the Swagger editor, make them independent modules, and that was a really good success, because when we make it independent, other people using it and then opening issues, contributing to it, it's great. So one thing that we wanted to do is to make everything that is calling the backend, that is interacting with the actual backend, a independent module. UI should not make those calls. UI should just call a module that does that. That module also should give UI that JSON schema. So that module, I would call it Swagger client. It's not done yet, but I think we should do it. We should have an independent Swagger client that can give me the schema, and I pass in the model to it, and it makes the call, and it gives me the response back.
Basically, a library that, given a Swagger specification, knows what the schemas are. Given a request payload, it can make the request on behalf of the user, basically.
Yeah.
And it's coming from working as a library, so there won't be any course issue.
Yeah, exactly. So that library can deal with course on its own, then Swagger editor doesn't have to deal with that.
Yeah.
So at the end of this talk, I'm going to show some of the modules that we made just for Swagger editor, and we made it available for everyone. First one is apply diff. So Angular has a daily checking mechanism, but if it's that that change is happening inside an array, then it thinks that the whole array changed. All right. So to avoid that, we wrote this apply diff library, which is a underscore low dash plugin. Gets two objects, the object that was before and the new objects, and deeply walks through the object and updates the properties deeply. So you can check it out in the GitHub. The other one is JSON formatter. JSON formatter is a nice way to show JSON objects. It shows the links, it has color coding, and it can also collapse objects in it. JSON formatter is very popular. It has more than 70 GitHub stars. And I'm really glad that we made it available to everyone. The other one is Angular JSON schema form, which is very similar to JSON formatter, but it's specific to JSON schemas. And if you need to render JSON schema in a nice way, you can use it. So this is a preview of a JSON schema. The other one is course it. So for making the request in the Swagger editor, we are going to just fail for course calls. But for importing YAML and JSON into Swagger editor, some people are just going to import something from GitHub, which is not course enabled. So we wanted that to work because that's not too expensive to handle it. So I wrote this Node.js app that enables course for any URL.
Just to get people on the context in the editor, you can go to file and you can do an import, where you can do import URL, import file. So that's what Mohsen is talking about, is we use this module.
Yeah, when you import URL, that URL, if it's behind the course, doesn't matter because this module is gonna be used. The other one is AngularJS directive UML generator, which is if you want to start an Angular directive that is going to be used by other people, you can use this UML generator to start a scaffolding project from it. So that was it.
Yeah, I think we have lots of questions. One question is, do we have two different AST for Swagger and YAML?
So the thing that we need to understand is JSON is YAML. So I think the question says JSON or YAML.
Yeah.
So because JSON is YAML, even if you write JSON in Swagger editor, we are going to treat it as YAML. Yeah. So that's a kind of tricky question, but yeah, we are using the same AST, even for JSON.
Second question is from Eric. He's asking, is this thing Chrome only or can any modern browser be used?
So it works in Firefox and Safari and IE 10+. I haven't used anything lower than that, but if you want to develop API, use a modern browser.
Okay, question from Bland. I hope I'm not messing up your name. Does it have test service API specs as well? So basically, I think if I understand the question correctly, given API spec, can Swagger editor, you can run set of tests to validate whether whether this implementation and the API defined is working. So like you can try it, you can make an API call and get a response. Is it a valid with respect to the schema, spec defined? I think that's the question.
Yeah, there is a validator service in Swagger.io. I think it's validator.swagger.io. You can pass a URL to your Swagger and it's going to give you back the response of the errors and everything. That validator is just a JSON schema validator. If you want to get better validation, which is much greater, use Swagger Tools. Swagger Tools is great for validating your Swagger.
Another question from Bulan again. Is this something we can build and set up internally or only over the cloud?
It's easy to set it up in your own laptop. You just clone the Git and then type npm start and it's gonna work.
Right. Next question, does it support latest Swagger spec?
Yeah, it's always up to date with the latest spec. And by the way, Swagger is not gonna change for a long time now. So Swagger 2 is gonna be here at least for 6 months. And if we change the Swagger spec to 2.1 in somewhere in future, you're gonna have an option to select which version of Swagger you're gonna use.
Yeah, so Swagger Editor, as you see, is only 2.0 compatible, but let's say if you have a 1.2 file, we have created a node module for converting 1.2 to 2.0.
Yes.
So with that process, what you'll get is one big JSON, which then you can import in Swagger Editor and take that as a starting line and move forward from there.
Yeah.
Hassan asked questions. Something related to Swagger was sold to SmartBear. How this acquisition impacts the future of Apigee Swagger relationship? This the whole thing is open source. We are very committed to. We all are very committed to success of Swagger as it is. We're gonna continue contributing to it. Swagger Editor is already actually on the Swagger API GitHub. So I do not see any problem going forward either. Obviously, feel free to ask more about this question in the Swagger spec on GitHub or any of the forums that you find suitable. Okay, we have one more question. That is this integrated with developer portal or plans? Right now, it's not integrated with developer portal, but we are working. It's referring to Apigee developer portal. So we are working on everything from Apigee was Edge and developer portal to for Swagger 2.0 compatible. That work is still in progress. Once that is done, once we have the backend ready, then of course you can use editor with the developer portal as well. Yeah, we would like to see that as well. Question from Vineet. Swagger currently does not allow uploading files. Will that be added to Swagger editor?
Yeah, that's why I said the trial operation is not completely done yet, and we didn't want to write a lot of code in the UI side because this needs to be handled by another module, and we are working to write that module, which I call Swagger client for now, but we don't know what that's being called later. But yeah, this is definitely the plan. We want to make the trial operation perfect.
Question is, how does download Swagger YAML JSON functionality work internally?
Yeah.
Well, we don't have screen sharing, but in editor, you can go, once you have a spec written, you can download it locally to your file system.
Yeah. So as I said, Swagger is a web app. Swagger editor is a web app, and downloading files in web app was not possible in before, but now in new W3C specs allow you to make a blob in the client side with JavaScript and assign a link to download that blob. So those download YAML, download JSON links are basically linked to download the blob that you make as you click file menu.
Yep. Last question, what are the further plans? So let me, both can answer that. Obviously, there are missing features, like try it operation is not fully working. We would like that to work as well, especially more related to authentication, OAuth support. I think there's lots of room for improvement there. Code completion is not 100% right in the sense that depending on what key presses you hit on the editor, like when I do a tab, sometimes I feel like it loses context, so it doesn't show you the right code completion, or it doesn't know what to do.
Yeah, because AST sometimes is inaccurate,
right,
because the YAML is not valid YAML in some cases. So it's a challenging problem, but we are going to work on it to make it better.
Yeah, and of course we are always looking for help from community. It's not our project; it's everybody's project, and it's pure open source, and we have some good checks and balances placed in terms of tooling, so that it should feel welcome to contribute towards it, and we'll certainly love that.
Yeah, definitely. There is a list in GitHub issues
Yeah.
of issues that are really easy to fix. And if you want to start with fixing issues in Swagger Editor, go there and ask me or anyone there to help you get started with Swagger Editor. We really love to have you come in and contribute to code.
Yeah. So I think that takes care of all the questions. If you have further questions, of course, feel free to continue file issues, anything like that on GitHub for Swagger API. Same thing you can do at the community.apigee.com. That's the new collaborative online portal we have launched where we talk about everything. It does not have to be everything Apigee, anything related to API, Node.js, JavaScript, whatever you feel like asking, we're there to answer. With that, thank you again, everybody. It's been fun. Hope to see you again.
All right, see you. Bye.